Before we get started, if you guys like this video, please give it a like. And if you find more stuff you like, go ahead and hit the sub and then slam that notification bell and let her do content all the time. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Alright, full disclosure, I'm not an Intellivision guy. Never had one growing up. My first console, as many of you know, was the ColecoVision. My parents dove in full force with that one, and we had plenty of games for it. But even with it, if you were to ask me which one I was most nostalgic for out of all the consoles I had when I was younger, it'd be the NES. It wouldn't be the ColecoVision. It's just the one I have the most memories of. However, knowing plenty of people who are into the Intellivision, I decided to do some more digging and figure out what's all the fuss about. What I found was a system that arguably had a longer lifespan than NES and had a very long line of firsts in video gaming. The Intellivision. Not a console that comes up when you think of retro games. It usually goes to Atari as far as the earliest consoles go. And that's fair. They were first to the market, and usually, in life, the first and the last are the only two that are truly remembered. Not so with this little console. Development started on the Intellivision in 1978, as Mattel saw video games taking off in a big way. But it would be another 2 years in 1980 that the console would officially launch with a fairly hefty price tag of $299. That's $100 more than the Atari launched at. This immediately left me searching and scratching my head, going, why? Well, for one, it was pointed out by my friends that it was the first 16-bit console, which, honestly, I laughed at this. How could something that looks like this be 16-bit? Well, that had in part to do with its processor being measured in kilohertz, not megahertz, and the fact that it can only really process and relay 10 bits at a time. Well then, you ask, why don't the games look better than, say, the Nintendo? Well, one of those answers is going to be ROM size. That's honestly the best answer I could find, is the ROM size and to keep that in line with the price point. Just like today where you can have a 4K or 8K system, it doesn't do you any good if you can't store the assets or data required to push those graphics. So what you got was closer to the Atari than the SNES, which for the time was still very, very good. The next thing that this system was very good at was dual wielding controllers. Yeah, I know, this sounds bizarre, but it was basically due to a hardware limitation, and the clever developers making a workaround. The controller itself had a disc pad used for motion and a keypad just above that was used for action inputs. However, you couldn't take inputs from both the keypad and the disc pad at the same time. What this meant is that you could not run and shoot at the same time, which was a problem for games like Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. The solution? Really simple. Make both controller inputs available at the same time, meaning the player could hold one controller and use the disc pad, and then hold a second controller in their other hand, allowing them to use the key inputs. This allowed for multiple inputs at the same time, essentially pioneering in many ways what the modern controller schema we all know and love today is. This next one's particularly interesting, since it's often credited to the Genesis and its partnership with EA for pioneering this type of game. Sports games, more accurately, professional sports licenses. This is something that hadn't been done before, was to obtain these licenses and advertise them on their game. This doesn't mean that you necessarily had team names or the players' names in the game, but it was officially licensed and recognized by the likes of the NFL, NHL, and MLB, which made it a huge hit with sports fans and gamers alike. Another first for Intellivision was voice. I know it sounds weird, because today, even the LEGO games have voice acting, but even through the NES era, this was really rare to accomplish. Intellivision released a device called the Intellivoice. This allowed a small subset of games, 12 slated in total, to have voice dialogue, such as the famous
Bell Electronics presents B-17 Bomber.
Yep, that. That was high-tech back in the day. No other system was doing that. Honestly, I can't think of another example of it till far later, almost the PlayStation days, but I'm sure one of you will correct me if I'm wrong on this one. Most of us are used to this today, but software updates never happened in the earlier days. If a game came out and there were issues, well, that was just part of the game. Intellivision did things a little differently. And no, I'm not saying they had an online console, but what they did was rework games post-release, updating and fixing issues with them. This didn't necessarily benefit people who already bought the game, but it ensured that future purchasers would get a more reliable experience, and it spoke volumes about their ability and willingness not only to listen to their customers, but to try to give them the best product they possibly could. By the way, You know that D-pad your controller has? The one you're so fond of? I know I am. That's been done before too. You guessed it, Intellivision. Where most controllers were using a stick, the Intellivision decided to use a disc pad. That worked very similar to the D-pad that we all know and use today. It allowed the player to simply navigate with their thumb, leaving their right hand to do all the dexterous work of using the inputs. Many would bypass this as the disc pad wasn't the most responsive and often was modded to a more tried and true joystick. But firsts are firsts, and innovation often breeds resistance, as much then as today. Hey, you know what Microsoft and Intellivision have in common? Game Pass. Come at me, Cyrus. Intellivision launched an online service called PlayCable. It was an additional service you could get contracted with your cable company, in which players would have access to a rotating library of 20 games at a time for the cost of $12 a month. The service ran from 1981 to 1983, offering many players a more economical way to enjoy many of the games the system had to offer for a much lower entry point. The system was easily reverse engineered though, making Mattel nervous that people would start hacking their games and making bootleg style games for their console. And the fact that it only had 10K subscribers and was only offered by 15 cable providers at the time made it a short-lived, if interesting, blip in gaming history. Now we're at another real first. Tommy Talico and his team are trying to bring us the Intellivision Amico, one of the few retro consoles on the market that, if it comes out, will again, following in the footsteps of Intellivision, bring us something new in the world of retro gaming, with many reimagined classics like Astro Smash, and Night Stalkers. It's easy to see why fans of the console would be excited. Just watching the gameplay, you get that sense of nostalgia, even in the new versions. Not only have the classics been reimagined for a new generation, the console has been reimagined for new and old generation alike, with a single goal: to bring families back into their living room and to have them playing and laughing together again. If this comes out, and I have little doubt it won't, it stands to do something that gaming has lacked the ability to do in recent years, and that's to bring the core gaming crowd together with the casual gaming crowd, in a system that both can enjoy. Why anyone would wish that to fail? Quite simply, is beyond me. If I don't pick the system up, my hat is off to Tommy and his crew for swinging for the fences on this one, and I look forward to seeing how far they can take it when it arrives. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Again, if you haven't, please subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a lot, lets me know what I'm doing is worth the time and effort, and as always, until next time, happy gaming.